Star Wars is full of aliens. You've got your head tentacle aliens, four-armed aliens, multiple head aliens. There's a lot of diversity in Star Wars aliens. And most Star Wars stories contain at least a few unique or new aliens, adding to the wideness of this universe. And with a universe this wide, there are bound to be some super obscure pulls when bringing in aliens from different projects. Most of these species have been named in sourcebooks and other pieces of expanded universe Star Wars material, but there are arguably even more unnamed alien species. Gonna give a quick shout out to Maddie T on Twitter at mtrack1000, who is painstakingly documenting every single unidentified Star Wars species on Twitter every single day. 512 and counting as of the making of this video. By the way, Maddie also has a working archive of every sentient Star Wars alien species ever and more on his blog, thatstarwarsauthor.com. He also helped me with one of the pictures that I needed for later in this video too, but I digress. The most iconic aliens in Star Wars are pulled by other creators all the time. Think Rhodians, Twi'leks, and Nikto. They're all pretty much everywhere, from the comics to the live-action series, to even the newer movies, which are an interesting case I'll touch on later in terms of alien variety, and to the Clone Wars, which overall does a spectacular job with its species diversity. But what about the others? You don't see Morcerians, Henempthe, and Given pulled into a lot of projects, though they are all in various books and comics quite a bit. At least not as much as species like Gotal, Bith, Rhodians, and more. And they all debuted in the original film in the Cantina, much like a lot of other now ubiquitous Star Wars aliens. This proves that the source of the alien does not define how frequent it'll be used. But when it comes to pulling species from other pieces of Star Wars media, the ones that interest me most are when they're pulled from non-screen media. And that's what we're talking about today. Which is the most obscure named alien species pulled from an expanded universe material in all of on-screen Star Wars? I have one in mind and I'm pretty set on it, and I think it's going to impress you. But before we get there, let's talk about a few more examples of this. And before we get started, one special caveat here is that I'm not counting unused concept art as an obscure source to pull from. One example that'll help you understand what I mean is that of the Lasat, which are actually not originally from canon with Zeb in Rebels, but debuted in the 1988 RPG adventure book Tatooine Manhunt, based on unused concept art for Chewbacca by the ever-wonderful Ralph McQuarrie. This concept art is not and never was canon, and thus is not a story-based source that the species is being pulled from. Though bringing the Lasat from Tatooine Manhunt into Rebels and from the original McQuarrie art is a fantastically obscure pull. Alright, let's take a look at a few more of these interesting specimens. The first and most obvious example is Grand Admiral Mithron Uruodu, or Thrawn. He's the go-to example of this. First established in Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn, Thrawn has been arguably the most iconic non-screen originated character in all of Star Wars, only competing with probably Mara Jade. And he's an alien, a Chiss to be exact, and he made his triumphant debut in Ahsoka just recently. Okay, who's next? We also have the Theelin, Theelin, pulled from Dark Empire number 3 into the Return of the Jedi Special Edition sequence at Jabba's palace, which is incredible. A semi-minor comic species that is brought into theaters only a few years after its debut? That's awesome! But even that level of obscurity is not what I'm talking about. Dark Empire was a very widely read comic, and even though a lot of people probably did not know that this character, Shug Ninx, is Theelin, the connection is there. Okay, this next one is not live action, but is still a great pull. It's the Selkath, who first appeared in a HoloNet news article of all things, which was a fake in-universe news site that promoted Attack of the Clones, being pulled into the Clone Wars, after being really prominent in Knights of the Old Republic too. I think there was some behind-the-scenes interaction going on here that allowed for this to happen, but still. An honorable mention we have is for the Saurians, Ki-Adi-Mundi's species. As is well known in the 1998 Star Wars comics, Ki-Adi-Mundi debuted before the release of The Phantom Menace, making him appear in comics before the film. Also from the 90s we have the Falleen, the notably scummy Prince Xizor's species. Not the whole species, just him. The Falleen were first introduced in the Shadows of the Empire multimedia project, making their way into the Clone Wars, The Phantom Menace technically due to the usage of Prince Xizor toys and some miniature photography, and later in the ever-iconic woods chase scene in Obi-Wan Kenobi. The Falleen had finally made it into live action, but this hasn't actually been confirmed. But to me, it's pretty clearly a Falleen. The scales, the hair. But again, it's not official, and it's not obscure enough. Another example is the Zhidek, an admittedly very varied insectoid species that originated in many source books dating back to the late 80s, but never appeared in any stories until The Last Jedi, where this Zhidek engorged with eggs appeared in the casino sequence. But even this wonderfully obscure pick is not on the level of the one that I'm thinking of. Another super obscure pull is the Ugor. The Ugor once again first appeared in an RPG adventure guide, and they're described as a single-celled yet human-scale organism made of cytoplasm, and thus were able to take any form as basically goop amoeba people. This meant that they would often wear spacesuits to maintain their humanoid form, which is the case for Har Gik, an Ugor who appeared in the background of Coronet Spaceport in Solo. I just can't believe we've actually had an Ugor in live action, though not their physical body, just the suit. The fellow spin-off film Rogue One also pulled the Gigarin from an RPG article from 1994, bringing the big hairy creature into Saw Gerrera's partisans, making this another obscure pull that is much appreciated in tying together a lot of the random loose ends from Star Wars' history. All of these example species originated in some form in some kind of comic or book, and that's all really awesome to see. We need more of that actually, as Star Wars has such a huge variety of species to pull from in its expanded universe for them to keep on pulling the same ones over and over again. I personally would love to see a Cern Pedalian on screen someday, but a man can dream. And without further ado, here we go. The most obscure Star Wars alien pulled into live action. But I can't just tell you. I gotta start with the story. My pick for the most obscure Star Wars alien species begins in 1995. With the beginning of the Star Wars customizable card game. SWCCG was a collectible card game released by Decipher Incorporated that covered so much of the Star Wars universe, with over 20 expansions that included characters as notable and significant to the Star Wars universe as Luke Skywalker, and Pote Snitkin, a weapons supplier and driver for Jabba, and Lieutenant Grieve, this guy. The SWCCG was full of super obscure characters and even resulted in lots of stuff being first established. One example of this is one card in particular. This is Brangus Glee. He's wrinkly, he's a pilot, and his neck is long. Brangus Glee is also established on this card as a force sensitive, something the collectible card game could just do for any minor character they wanted to. But it also says he's a dexterous traveler from the distant planet of Dorn Namith. Keep this in mind. Brangus Glee first appeared here, but you'll notice this picture doesn't look like a painting, or a film screenshot, or a behind the scenes photo. That's because it's not any of those. When making new creatures for a Star Wars film, there is a specific type of concept art called a maquette. This is a physical sculpture of a creature, sometimes just a head, that allows for it to be seen from all angles and truly considered in regards to its physicality. Lots of iconic creatures started as maquettes before being fully realized in their film appearances. For the Jabba's Palace sequence in Return of the Jedi, many maquettes were created, and of course, not all of them were used in the final film. One of them was Alien 23. Alien 23 was the name of this brown, spindly, shoulders-up maquette, which was not chosen to populate the background of Jabba's palace, though this design would not go forgotten, as it eventually reached the eyes of the folks over at Decipher Inc. as they were looking for characters to populate their card game. And thus, Brangus Glee was born. Named as an anagram of Snuggle Bear, an inside joke amongst Decipher employees, never appearing in any on-screen content, but still being a canon species, as SWCCG was considered canon when it was released. Brangus Glee's species was first established here, the only thing known about them being their homeworld of Dorn Namith and their dexterity. And now, let's completely switch topics to a little film called The Last Jedi. You've probably never heard of it, and probably never heard people arguing about it online. This film is not exactly known for its common aliens. This is actually a big problem for the sequel trilogy, and now don't get up in arms, but I am personally a big fan of the sequels, and The Last Jedi is my favorite of the three. But their biggest problem, in my eyes, is the lack of recognizable alien species. Would it have killed them to put a few Twi'leks, Rodians, and Ithorians on screen? Yes, even the common ones that I was complaining about earlier. And yes, I do know there's an Ithorian and a Snivian on Pisana way in the background. But for some reason, the creative team behind these movies decided to make all new alien designs for the entire trilogy, which, wow, what a bold decision. And not one that I entirely hate. I really love a lot of the sequel's new alien designs, and the one sequence that totally stands out to me for that is the alien designs in Canto Bight. We've got the wonderful little Trogloff, the charming little Sweartons which have appeared in The Mandalorian since, something a lot of these have in common, the crazy fun Palandags of the band, this lobster guy, the Bufopels, this flared head alien, this great bug chick, Baron Yasto Atzman's species the Ungrilla, this now common horn species, and of course the mole guy. All new species designed specifically for The Last Jedi. But in terms of returning species from Star Wars stories released before The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi has very few options, aside from original trilogy characters. You know, Admiral Akbar and the Mon Calamari, Chewbacca, the Wookiee, and Nien Nunb, the Celestin. And surprisingly, besides the Zhidek I mentioned earlier. This leads us to my pick for the most obscure Star Wars EU alien to make it into on-screen content. During a deleted scene in the Canto Bight sequence of The Last Jedi, Rose and Finn's fathiers break through a glass ceiling into Zord's spa and bathhouse. During this scene, we can see several all-new alien designs, one of which is this individual. This character's name is Lexo Suger. Lexo Suger featured in the Canto Bight anthology novel in the story Hear Nothing, See Nothing, Say Nothing by Ray Carson, which explained that this character is an off-world immigrant to Canto Bight and is a masseuse who will do anything to save his adopted human daughter. He uses his very dexterous hands to give the best massages. And he's a Dor-Namethian.
What?
That's right, a character on screen in a deleted scene for 2017's The Last Jedi is a Dor-Namethian, derived from the planet Dor-Nameth, the same world home to Brangus Glee, who was created for a trading card game, based on an unused maquette created during the production of Return of the Jedi over 35 years earlier. But you say, Dan, Lexo Suger wasn't actually in the film. The scene was deleted, so what gives? Trust me, dear viewer, I felt this concern too, until fall of 2022, when we were all blessed with Andor Season 1. And there, if you're looking closely, in the background of Mon Mothma's dinner parties, is another Dor-Namethian. No doubt reusing the animatronic, as several other Canto Bight alien costumes were reused for these scenes. But take that, Dor-Namethians in new live-action Star Wars content in the year of our Lord 2022? It just fills me with so much wonder and joy to know that there are people out there that care about things like this. It's one of my favorite parts of Star Wars. Someone decided that this alien design, based on concept art by Ivan Manzella, matched up with an obscure trading card from 1998, enough to make that connection and make it so a Dor-Namethian appeared on our screens for no reason at all other than sheer celebration of Star Wars. Star Wars is divisive. I know. You might hate a new show or movie. You might love them. But what people don't realize is just how absolutely gargantuan this universe is. For every Star Wars story that you don't like, there are 100 more. 1,000 more. I'm serious, once you break past the Star Wars that starts and ends with blue text or is just streamed on Disney+, the galaxy gets a whole lot bigger. And trust me, friend, there's room for all of us in here. There's room for so many because there's just so much. Find a character. I don't care if they appeared in the Outlander Club in Episode 2, in just 6 issues of a comic series from 2004, or only featured in a source book from 1988. Star Wars is a place you can truly explore and never know it all. Find a character you can tell others about and they'll have no idea who you're talking about, and then you'll have to pause a movie for one frame that they appear in. Find a character you can only experience in prose and desperately yet cautiously wish to see them on screen someday. Find a character who means a lot to you, for whatever reason. Something people don't know a lot about. Find the power in that. That's how Star Wars keeps being Star Wars. People like us. People like the creative team behind the visual guides, the visual dictionaries, the RPG supplements of old. People like us keep caring about the things that other people just don't because we find them and we just think they're cool. Find your character. Find your ship. Find your planet. Find your Glup Shitto. Find your Dor-Namethian. Thanks for joining me on this journey.